Thank you, Amy, and hi, everyone. I'm Mahalia Chang, Vogue's head of digital content, and I'm joined here today by Anna Kirova, CEO of dating app Feelds as part of Vogue Codes Campus. Dating, relationships, and sex are such massive parts of our lives, especially during our university years. But the dating digital landscape has shifted how traditional relationships unfold. Today, I'd love to tackle a couple of those changes with the intention of understanding how this shifting digital world might impact our physical lives. So I'd like to start with the question, in this modern world, our views on sex and love and relationships have thankfully come a long way over the years. How has your view on these things developed over time, and what do you attribute that evolution to?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I think for the changes that we're seeing in the world, there are many reasons for people sort of transitioning into new ways of connecting. And one of the main sort of, I guess, drivers is that I think we normalize what we do by speaking openly and saying exactly what field is. I think that one of the biggest shifts that I personally experienced was that I grew up in a world where identity and sexuality were static. So the default assumption is that you find what you are and you stick to it, and that's what it is. Discovering that sexuality can be fluid and that your identity can be fluid has completely transformed how I see the world. And I know a lot of people who've gone through the same. We're seeing it with new generations. Gen Z report being more fluid than any other previous generation. Labels in general serve more for belonging rather than static identification of the self and of what one wants. So that's like a big shift, which I guess I've been a part of. And the other one is too that what I was saying earlier, when you start talking about this and when you start giving names to your feelings or to your experience and to use language very consciously around this, you start to grow more sensitive to what you want, what you're after. And I think that's what we've seen in Feelds. That's what we're seeing in the world too. The plethora of gender identities, for example, is one of the symptoms of that, so to speak.
Yeah, incredible. And it's such a refreshing change that we can now reflect on that our identities can evolve over time and we can change how we feel about ourselves as we go on. And I wanted to ask, you founded Feeld with your partner, Demo. Can you tell me a little bit about how that unfolded and how you got started?
Yeah. So everything started a few months after we got together as a couple in 2014. We were very in love. We were super happy. I was over the moon for having met him. And there came a moment when I fell for a girl. So I met a woman at the workplace where I used to go. At the time, I used to work at a bar. And I really felt attracted to her. And I was very confused exactly because what I was saying, I had assumed I have a static identity. My sexuality was already defined, manifested by my boyfriend. And yet this woman came into my life and I was at a loss. I didn't know really what it meant. And because we were so close and I really cherished what we were building together with Demo, I decided to tell him about it because even though nothing had happened, the very feelings were strong enough for me to have to bring them to attention. And I was prepared for us to potentially breaking up after telling him. But instead, first of all, he was very moved that I felt so guilty of something so human. And we started talking about how we don't really know how monogamy works in the long term. We're young and we're creative and curious. We don't really understand how it's possible to commit to that. Like same with sexuality. How is it possible to know now for your whole life what you're going to be and how you're going to experience the world and what lens you're going to use. So Dimo and I tried to date. So even though we were a couple, we continued dating, but it was very difficult because of this static idea, which was prevalent at the time. People were looking for one partner. And Dimo created Feelds then. And I joined the company a year and a half later.
It's amazing that such a personal app can develop from such a personal story and of like something that you went through in your real life. It's incredible. And my next question is, what is Feelds' point of difference if you're talking to a new user in comparison to other dating apps on the market?
I think our context here that we were building so far helps a lot. So I'm just going to probably tie it back to that. The main point of difference is exactly this openness to what is possible and how you connect. Most dating apps are based on that assumption, that idea of a more static experience, whereas Feeld is really welcoming an idea of a fluid experience, an idea of wanting one thing today and another thing tomorrow. And what that thing is also not defined by us. So we really allow people to express what they're looking for through connecting others. So are people looking for just a more casual, standard relationship? Are people looking for a friend, someone to explore their sexuality with, someone to explore their current relationship with and bring in someone else? The main difference is the environment that we've built. And how exactly we define it and how we welcome people is quite different for different people depending on their background. And as I said, because of the separate use cases, many users have their own view of what Feeld is, but most of them stay exactly because that can change, and Feeld allows them to continue experiencing and meeting people.
Amazing. And on that topic of exploration, Feeld is playing a big part of the conversation around monogamy and polyamory and what we deem as being normal in societal relationship expectations. What sort of feedback or maybe shifts in perception have you noticed from your users?
We were seeing slow adoption of the idea of non-monogamy and the idea that monogamy is not necessarily for everyone, but the pandemic sped that up massively. I think forcing people to disconnect from others and to disconnect from a lot of patterns in their life, which might have distracted them away from understanding what happiness means for them, what fulfillment means for them. A lot of people have, as we know, wanted to reassess their jobs. So there was that whole idea, that whole movement of people leaving their workplaces. And a lot of people were reassessing their relationships. So they would look into how exactly they connect and realize that it's not based on what makes them happy. It's not based, even if it's all partners involved, it's not based on what makes both partners happy. It's based on what is dictated from an unspoken idea of an ideal relationship. And we're seeing in Feeld a lot of use of words like E&M, which is ethical non-monogamy, C&M, which is consensual non-monogamy, open relationships, which weren't that prevalent before. There was upwards of 200% increase in use of that word in people's profiles, expressing what they're after. So that happened only throughout a year. And to me, this is a sign that people are not afraid of that anymore. If previously it might have been associated with insecurity, cheating, now it's associated with owning one's experience, being honest, being respectful of all people involved in the relationship. And I think it's been wonderful to see. Another thing which I've noticed too, and I'm an event right now, and I have to explain to a lot of people what Feeld is. A few years ago, when I would say that we are an inclusive space and that people who are dating an open relationship are welcome to use Feeld, there was a little bit of fear, or not fear, I can't really put a word to it, but as if slight discomfort in what I'm saying to a lot of people who are listening. Now it's just, sorry?
A bit of trepidation.
Yes, exactly. Whereas, like, am I okay to ask questions? What is this about? Whereas now I see people's faces light up, and just the curiosity is a lot more. I think people feel safer being curious about this, because everyone has a friend now who has been open or is open. And that is a wonderful organic shift that we're seeing, which we've definitely played a part in.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the idea of those labels a little bit more, because Feeld spans a huge field, if I might say so, in terms of gender identities and sexual preferences and kind of relationship statuses and all of those things. How did you go about ensuring that the app was as inclusive as possible?
It's an ongoing process. So what is inclusive today might be completely different from what's inclusive tomorrow. So one of the things that we're trying really hard to do is to be as aware and involved in communities to understand how the language changes, how people prefer to self-identify today versus yesterday. In terms of the lists that were on Feeld and how they came about, I think there is a story which I find very important, both for career growth and for experience in terms of leading a platform that is supposed to be inclusive and listening to all voices. We used to have only a few gender options in the early days, I think 3. So there was men, women, and trans, and other, so maybe 4. And we were receiving feedback that a lot of people didn't feel seen by these limited options. This is very early days. So think the app is just built, barely working, and all of that stuff. But we had a community even then. And it was one of the first big decisions I made as a product lead. I decided to change one of the options, and instead of having trans option, I wanted to put beyond, which to me sounded like, oh, this is going to welcome everyone who's beyond the binary. And I felt very proud. It took us a while to do that. And once it was out, I received a very long message from a trans member of our community who explained to me how they felt erased by this change. Sorry, I always get a bit sensitive talking about this, because it's a moment when, in wanting to do something good without really understanding the people that you're doing it for, you can go the other way. And once I read their email, they explained why. And that was a moment when I realized we cannot try to box people in boxes. We have to offer as many options as we can. And so I did a lot of research. We were very few people at the time. We had very few resources. But I spoke to a lot of different people from the community. And we put together a massive list. We worked with a consultant, and then we put it out. And that's been one of the defining features of our platform. So that's how that came about.
Well, it sounds like the feelings and safety of your users is such a big part of the user experience and how you handle the app. So I'd like to ask, how do you navigate topics like safety and anonymity in the app, and how do you protect those things?
It's almost sometimes a scale where you put safety or on one side and anonymity on the other. I think it's an ongoing process. There isn't ever a solution which just because it's working today, it's going to work tomorrow. A little bit with similarly to what, I mean, there's a lot of fluidity in what we do, obviously. I think when it comes to safety, we try to be, first of all, as transparent to people as possible. So we share a lot of information on how people can own their own experience and feel safe by doing things themselves. So we try to have a lot of material for and content for educating people how to be safe, what is okay, what are the risks for doing one or another thing. We have a lot of, obviously, processes inside the company and inside the app, technically speaking, to prevent malicious activities by different members. But as I said about transparency, we try to be very clear that we cannot own the whole experience for people as a platform. And that's where it's an ongoing journey. How much should we get involved as a business in people's lives? And where do we stop? And we allow people to own their own experience, but provide them with all the tools and resources to feel safe and empowered to act if they have to. I think one of the, in terms of anonymity, some of the practices that we've introduced in the app are around allowing people to feel safe when they explore by not asking them to expose themselves. So we offer private photos so people can share photos of themselves only when they feel comfortable. People don't have to use their real names. But there's some parts of people's profiles that we really need for us to verify that they're real. So it's like a balancing act.
Incredible. And I guess that, we've talked about the experience of people when they get onto the app, but what do you think it is that so many people find appealing about using an app when it comes to sex and dating and relationships? Does it have something to do with that anonymity, or is it because of time efficiency, or does it, is it because it's allowing us to vet our matches before we meet them? I'd love to hear your insights about, how the audience gets to the point of getting on the app.
That's a very good question. I was talking to someone actually yesterday who told me that they've never used a dating app, and dating apps just don't work for them, to the point where they don't even want to try it. They said, I prefer meeting people organically. I've met wonderful people this way. And I can't imagine being able to do that on an app. So I think, and then I've met people obviously through speaking to our community who have seen their lives change for the better just by using Feelds and having met wonderful groups of people through it. So I believe that technology is just giving us options. So dating apps are an option. They work really well, I think, in contexts when people want to feel more in control of their experience. So if you say don't feel like an interaction is going well, you have actual practical tools to stop it. If you're together in a physical space, the tools are different, and some people might not feel equipped or confident to act. Whereas in an app, there's a lot more, I guess it's a lot more accessible for anyone who'd like to feel in control of their experience. We know, especially people who feel vulnerable, dating apps can be a salvation for them to, even if it's to use a dating app to then go out and meet someone physically. And the other thing too is because Feelds is so focused on exploration, I believe people are able to test different identities. So you can show yourself in one way, see what happens then. And then the next day, show yourself in a different way, see what kind of people you connect then. So I think there is a lot of, a lot of opportunity for people to...
About the options as well. I think a lot of young
Exactly.
people will relate to that and about having the options. You can do the traditional meet cute, or you can explore it in a way that you have a little bit more control over.
Yes, definitely.
Now, that's the end of my questions, but I can see we have a few audience questions coming through that I'd love to ask you. So the first one, here is the first one. One of our viewers would like to know, do you think the rise of dating apps are contributing to a decline in meet cutes in the wake of the pandemic?
To a decline of what, sorry?
Meet cutes, like the traditional way of like, oh, we bumped into each other at a coffee book or a coffee shop, or in a bookstore, or he picked up my handkerchief on the side of the road, or whatever it is. Do you think that is a bit lost now in the art of digital dating?
That's a wonderful question. I don't think it's lost, but as with anything else that technology has gotten involved with, the stories have multiplied. So I think that's what it's probably more about. So you have the story about the cafe and like meeting up with someone that way, but then next to it, you have probably 10 stories of people meeting online. I also think it's a matter of context of the dating app and what interested the person, what interested you in the person on the dating app, which can make the story quite cute. I've heard such stories. So I don't think it's led to a decline. It's just more stories.
Of a change.
Yes.
I know myself and a lot of my friends also enjoy a good dating app story, and for which there are plenty. But that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today on Vogue Codes Campus. We hope you really enjoyed the session. Of course, we'd love to hear from you, so please keep an eye on your inbox for the link to rewatch the session on demand and to share your thoughts on today. Next Saturday, the 18th of June, we are hosting our annual Vogue Codes Summit at Carriageworks in Sydney. There are a limited number of tickets remaining, and we would be thrilled if you could join us. So please head to vogue.com.au/codes and use discount code VC40, that's VC40, to redeem 40% off your ticket. The summit has another incredible line of speakers, so we hope to see you there. Thank you for your time today. Bye.